17-inch laptops are kind of like minivans. They're very large and they're not the most attractive looking thing in the market. However, they are spacious, they're well built, and they're designed to accommodate as much as possible. Now with that said, we're having a look at one of the more popular 17-inch offerings in the laptop industry. I'm talking about HP's NV17. 2022 edition. So this bad boy here is rocking Intel's latest 1255U i7 processor, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. We have a 1 terabyte solid state drive. Additionally, we also have RTX 2050 with 4 gigabytes of VRAM built right in. And yes, this does have Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.2 standards on board. And lastly, this is a massive 17-inch display that has touch captivity built right in. There is a ton of stuff to talk about with this laptop. Like I said, it's as feature rich as it is big. So let's get started. The HP NV17 comes in a massive box befitting of a 17-inch laptop. It's so large, in fact, that I had a little bit of a hard time fitting it into my camera frame. Now, once you remove the content seal and proceed to open up the box itself, the first thing you'll be greeted by is the laptop itself. And remove all that protective packaging and here it is. This thing is heavy, seriously. But more on that in a quick minute. You also have a 90-watt charging adapter, and guess what? It has USB-C charging out of the box. Thank you, HP. You also have, of course, your standard wall outlet charging cable piece, and you have this paper envelope, which presumably has the quick start, warranty, and regulation information. Now, at first glance, the HP NV17 just feels like a bigger version of the 15-inch laptop. And you'd be right, because you have a very similar build composition. You have a high-quality metallic exterior all around, including the inner chassis. You have those same sharp linear lines with those rounded edges and that overall sleek design. However, you don't truly realize just how massive this thing is until you take into account the fact that it weighs as much as a newborn baby at approximately 8.15 pounds. This thing is darn heavy, and I would not recommend it for all-day commuting in any way or form. With that said, starting off with the top side, you'll notice again you have a textureless, smooth metallic finish. It feels really premium, and I like that shine with that silver color. Great stuff. Of course, HP reminds you spent a ton of money here by giving that fancy HP logo, just to make you feel good. The rear side of the laptop is flat, linear, and classy looking. You have some good old NV branding, and of course it also houses the hinge mechanism. Now the sides of the laptop are my favorite part because of the rich I/O port diversity we have here. So on one side, we have two USB-A super speed ports, we have a modern HDMI 2.1 port, and of course the good old headphone jack. But wait, on the other side it gets better because you have one more USB-A super speed port that also has sleep charging functionality. You have two Thunderbolt 4 ports, both of which support power delivery and DisplayPort 1.4, and of course you have a good old full-sized SD card reader. Now that's what I consider to be good I/O port diversity. Take note, other manufacturers. With that said, at the bottom of the laptop, again, you have a nice flat surface here. You'll notice you have a pretty large and long air intake vent, which is of course always a good thing from a cooling perspective. You do have rubber grips to keep the laptop in place. Interestingly enough, you'll notice you do have two speaker grills that are located directly at the bottom, as opposed to the sides which you see with these smaller NV laptops. As soon as you unfold this laptop, you immediately appreciate the clean and massive aesthetics you have going here. Look at all that palm rest space. It is ruined by the fact that they have Intel and Nvidia stickers here. It's a shame that HP won't pay a couple of extra bucks to get those off, even on their premium laptops. Now, putting that aside, we do have a pretty large trackpad here that's befitting of a laptop of this size. I do appreciate the fact that you have a glass surface finish. Unfortunately, it's slanted downwards, which almost gives the illusion of having flex, even though it doesn't, and it kind of feels flimsy sometimes, but the click calibration is pretty good, and overall, it's a pretty good experience. Unfortunately, I wasn't as impressed with the keyboard. So starting off with the good stuff, you do have nice large keycaps that are also very clearly labeled. Now the bad news is that they often feel finicky and loose. And not just that, when you're actually typing on the keyboard, the keystrokes often feel shallow and soft. They don't feel tactile and firm. It just kind of takes away from the typing immersion. Now on top of that, the backlighting here seems like it was implemented by a 12-year-old. Seriously, you have all sorts of subtle dark spots on the backlighting. It's not even, there's a ton of leakage, and it doesn't get very bright either. It should have and could have been a lot better. Thankfully, you do have the inclusion of a full-sized 10 keypad over here, which is of course always a welcome sight. Now, in case you're wondering, that massive grill on top of the keyboard is not a speaker grill, nor is it a cooling vent. It's kind of this thing with the HP Envy. The designers kind of have this thing with poking a bunch of holes and they think it looks cool. One of the weirdest design choices I've seen on the Envy series as a whole. The hinge mechanism is on point. It does not wobble, it doesn't feel cheap or finicky, and it's definitely well tuned and should last for the years to come. Now, as far as the display fitting goes, you'll appreciate the fact that you have a sleek looking chin, even though it is somewhat fat over here and has some cool HP branding on it. You also have reasonably narrow bezels, but they're not as thin as some other laptop manufacturers out there. You'll also appreciate the fact that you do have a relatively thin forehead at the top, though you do have, yet again, a lackluster 720p webcam. However, I will say this much, it is one of the better 720p webcams out there. It does pretty well in well-lit settings. Low light, not so much. The display on this laptop is surprisingly pleasant. So you do have a full HD or 1080p resolution, a 16:9 aspect ratio. This is a IPS panel with amazing wide viewing angles. Additionally, you do have a standard 60Hz refresh rate, but you also have a fully touch captive system on board, which means you can use your fingers to interact with the display, though I've never really understood what you do with a touch captive display on a non-2-in-1 laptop, but I'm sure someone out there has an appreciation for it. Additionally, you'll be happy to know you have a 100% sRGB rating, which means colors look lively, they're vivid, and they'll be great for anyone who's doing color sensitive activities. Now, what's not so great is the fact that you only have a peak brightness of 300 nits, which is very limited given the fact this is a super glossy display, which means it attracts a ton of glare. This may as well have been a solar panel at this point. Now, performance is a more complex matter given the fact that you can also get this laptop in a 1260p i7 configuration as opposed to the 1255U one we have here, and it all depends on the region and retailer you're buying from. Now, with that said, this model here is pretty peppy, so day-to-day tasks like web browsing, watching videos, or typing out Word documents will work in a seamless, super fast fashion. But more intensive tasks like, let's say, photo editing, 3D modeling, programming, and coding are also very much viable. They work great thanks to that 16 gigabytes of RAM we have on board. But even the most intensive activities like 4K video editing, for example, is entirely possible on here. You do get the occasional frame drop, but it's a pretty smooth and viable experience. I'm sure it's further enhanced by that RTX 2050 we have over here. Speaking of graphics, games like Fortnite can easily run at a healthy 60 plus frames per second at high settings, and you can of course play a number of other games thanks to that dedicated graphics card we have here. The best part about having a 17-inch laptop is thermals. So we found under unrealistic peak loads, this laptop can hit a maximum surface temperature of around 43 degrees Celsius. And under more realistic sustained loads, it hovers around 36 degrees Celsius. Not too shabby if you ask me. Now, fan noise is kind of similar, so we found under moderate loads, it goes around the 38 decibel mark, and under maximum loads, you can go as high as 44 decibels, which again isn't particularly loud. In the battery life department, we have a 55 watt per hour battery, and battery life isn't bad, but it's not great either. So we found we got up to 9 hours on a single charge doing activities like light photo editing, web browsing, watching YouTube videos at 1080p with speaker volume around 40%. So could have been a little bit better. Now, with that said, the real underwhelming feature here are these speaker systems on this thing. I know HP tosses around the word Bang and Olufsen and it's supposed to become a concert out of nowhere, but they're not that great, really. I mean, the volume doesn't get very loud and the bass is okay. Have a quick listen for yourself.
I can feel the cold world try to put me on my knees, and I feel all of the pressure to provide everything. So I keep my head down, work hard and believe that tomorrow will be better. Give it time and you'll see. But there's always a new fight, always a rough night, cause it takes a few tries to get something new right. When it's been a tough life, you need a new view sight to see what to do, like to make a new move right. And I can feel the
The HP Envy 17 starts at about $1,200 USD, but goes for about $1,400 for the configuration we have here. But in all fairness, you do get a fair bit in return. For beginners, you have a well-crafted build here. It's a sturdy laptop, it has great premium materials, it just looks and feels nice. Additionally, you have a great trackpad. I also appreciate the fact that you have a high quality display on here that also has touch captivity as cherry on top. Additionally, I love the I/O port diversity they've provided with this laptop, and you also have great performance as well as thermals to go along. Now, it's not all perfect, of course. For example, you have a lackluster webcam, battery life could have been a little bit better, and also the keyboard is one of the worst things about this laptop. It's poorly lit, it's just not that good overall. But despite its flaws, I still think this is a pretty good laptop, and it actually undercuts a lot of the competition in the premium market despite having a relatively high price tag. Let me know what you think of the HP NV17 and whether or not you would consider getting one. As always, if you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing to our channel and liking this video. We put a ton of work and effort into these videos, and it would really mean a lot if you would consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next one.